It's a shell that when it bursts in the sky, it has 35 of these gold glittering comets in them. And the glitter kind of looks like if you ground up 18 karat gold and pixie dusted it into the sky. And it twinkles when it descends.
It ignites the burst charge at its full apex up in the sky. That burst charge also ignites the stars.
And just as you think that the comet is going to extinguish and go out, it then splits again, and it creates this dust effect at the tail end of the burn. It's something that's special to me, and then also the rest of the family. When you see that shell, it's also a tribute and a remembrance of my dad.
Jimmy Grucci once told me about making fireworks, that an accident was always vaguely in the back of the mind. You live with it every day, he told me, sort of like knowing that nuclear weapons are pointed at you. Except with fireworks,
my second great-grandfather started our business in Bari, Italy. In 1850, they immigrated through Ellis Island in the early 1900s, and they set up a factory literally 7 miles from where we're sitting here today on Long Island. And they operated their factory until about the late 1920s, 1929. My grandfather, he opened his own factory in 1929 right in this very village, Bellport Village. So he had 3 children. My grandmother had 3 children, which was the 4th generation. And my father was the oldest, and he was somewhat the innovator at that time. I remember the days in being at Coney Island at 5-6 years old, and it got into my blood. I mean, I was with my dad. The show would go off, all the people come up, clap, tell him how a great job, and it's addictive. And that, to me, at 5 years old, the energy, the camaraderie of being with a group of people, the ability to create something and see so many people enjoy it, it's addictive. And at that time, I knew from as long as I can remember that this is what I wanted to do. And then in 1983, unfortunately, we had the explosion.
On a Saturday of a Thanksgiving weekend, the Grucci's plant exploded. Debris from this blast drifted down on townships 10 miles away. Jimmy Grucci had been working on the big shells he loved to make, big 8-inch color shells, though he was always a bit anxious about them. He and his cousin, a pretty dark-haired girl who was Jimmy's assistant, were instantly killed, only a few feet from the shop where they were working on the big shells. Something must have happened in there.
We lost everything. We lost 2 loved ones and lost our entire facilities. There was a lot of activity. There was a lot of shoes to fill. There was a lot of space to fill because there was a big gap that was caused by losing him. So I kind of took the role of trying to fill his shoes, and still am trying to fill his shoes.
Good morning, Fireworks by Grucci.
Favorite firework would be a brocade Kimura. It's a large, breaking, big willow-type Kimura that would descend all the way down to the ground. And with the music and a large volley of them, it just fills the sky. It's a beautiful shell.
I like the spectacle of the Niagara Falls. You have some pictures around here that you'll see the Niagara Falls coming off the entire bottom part of the Brooklyn Bridge, from the bottom of the actual bridge itself, hitting the East River down below. So I'll never forget firing that shell, that exact effect. And it still brings shivers up my spine now, thinking about it.
I love the giant willow ones. They're just so pretty when they come down like a waterfall. It twinkles as it's coming down, and then it slowly dissipates, so it makes it really pretty, kind of magical, I guess.
When somebody asks me what's my occupation, I generally would say we're in the firework entertainment business as well as manufacturing of explosives business, because the other half our business, about 50% of our revenue is in manufacturing of explosives for the Department of Defense. We make a tremendous amount of training devices, hand grenade simulators, ground bomb simulators, trip flare simulators, and things like that, as well as some components that go into live munitions. So I say we're a fireworks performance company as well as a manufacturer for the Department of Defense. This New Year's Eve, we're in the heart of the design process right now. A project of this size has about 40,000 different cues and circuits that have to be initiated over an 8.5-minute period.
So you've got a sense of how it will go, but it's still an unknown.
Yeah, you absolutely have a sense. If everything goes perfectly, what this is going to look like. But there's so many variables in a live performance. One rehearsal, you can't fire this whole show and then look at it and make changes in real time out in the field. So this is the countdown towards the launching of the World Record Show.
What do we see?
So these are sky-etching digits that are fired with a series of comets that are fired in a very tight pattern to create the digits. Now you notice it's not one digit every second. It's slow in the beginning, but now you'll see it picks up. And it's intended to be very quiet as far as nothing in the sky. And then you'll see this long tail. This is the launching of the shell now. You see this long tail. The music will be playing also with it. And then when it reaches its apex, now each one of these small trails will be one 5-inch in diameter, 5-pound comet that's loaded inside of the shell. And it's designed to burn long enough for it to come all the way down to the water. So when you see that
Lawrence Lepore.
Mr. Lepore. Councilor Dela Rosa has nominated Lawrence Lepore. Any further nominations?
Motion to close the nominations, Mr. Clerk.
Councilor Knight has closed the nominations. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice President Dela Russo.
Lawrence Lepore.
Council Falco.
Lawrence Lepore.
Council Knight.
Lawrence Lepore.
Council Byrne.
Lawrence Lepore.
Council Marks.
Lawrence Lepore.
Council Scarpelli.
Lawrence Lepore.
President Carabello.
Lawrence Lepore.
7 in the affirmative for Lawrence Lepore. Congratulations. Come on up and take your oath of office. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I state your name.
Rain, through snow.
Do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as city messenger according to the best of my ability and understanding agreeable to the rules and regulations of the Constitution and the laws of Commonwealth and the ordinances of the city of Medford. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You want to say a few words now?
No, it's okay.
Okay. All right, the chair declares a quick recess at, what time is it anyways? 7:10? Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll reconvene with the gradual chair.
Congratulations. No photography?
Brianna, thank
It's going to be a song. Christmas next week. Yep. Great Samaritan. You sick?
Bye, Dottie. Thank you.
You stick around?
Dottie, stay.
Come on, Dottie.
She's got a late night tomorrow.
We thought that the other day. We froze up there too.
Said St. Mary's, I think, 11, maybe earlier, that's Freddie. No wake, private. Yeah, kid.
Okay, so you did. Done, done, done. Michael. Everybody talking. Does the chance about what you got so? Because you're over the big show.
What? Thank you. I want to see how.
Personal plans to take a long time. I haven't had a real vacation
Probably tomorrow.
I mean, even...
Yeah, I saw it. What? Yeah. No, I think you tell me something. And again, no, you shouldn't go to this guy.
Recreation.
I know you're off the bus stops. I know you're off the bus stops for sure.
Motion to reconvene. All right, everybody ready? Good evening, everyone. 18004, offered by Councilor Della Russo, be it resolved that the standing committee rules be adopted as the standing rules of the City Council insofar as they are applicable.
Move.
Vice President Della Russo.
Move approval, Mr. President.
Second. On the motion by Councilor Della Russo.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. 18005, offered by Vice President Della Russo, be it resolved that the City Council transfer all papers and committees are on the table from 2017 Council to the 2018 Council.
Mr. President, I move approval. Second, Mr. President.
Seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Motions, orders, and resolutions. 18006, offered by Councilor Marks. Be it resolved that the City of Medford recognize longtime public servant and 30-year veteran of the Medford School Committee, Lena DeGiantomaso, for her dedication and commitment to the children of our community. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it's with great honor and great pride that I rise tonight to honor, in my opinion, someone that has done so much for this community, not only in the capacity as a member of the school committee for 3 decades, but also as someone very involved in many, many organizations throughout the community, and someone very instrumental in leading the path on many, many initiatives in this community, of which I will mention some here tonight, Mr. President. I personally had the opportunity to serve with Lena DeGiantomaso for 6 years as a member of the school committee. It was my first time elected in this community back some years ago, and when I first got on the school board, it was kind of intimidating. I was new to the process, new to the system, and Lena was one of the first people to put her hand out and welcome me to the school committee, and really took me under her wing for a period of time to show me the ins and outs. And I can remember my first few times being part of the negotiations when we used to have to negotiate with the teachers. And, this would be a lengthy, 6-7 hour night. We used to get in there at 5 o'clock, no breaks, and you can always count on one thing. And it wasn't to settle the contract. It was the fact that Lena would cook a homemade lasagna and make sure that everyone was fed. That was the type of person she was. She was very considerate and always thinking of others. And, her one goal that I found out early as a member of the school committee, she taught me, she said, Mike, no matter what happens, we're here for the children of this community. We're here to make sure they get the best education possible. And she said, my votes are always predicated on whatever is good for the children. And I learned that early with Lena, that she was very dedicated, she was very loyal, and she meant what she said. She didn't go back on her word. If Lena gave you her word was as good as gold, Mr. President. Another thing too, Lena attended every single meeting, not just with the school committee and other meetings we had, every single function that happened in this community, Lena DeGiantomaso was part of it. I think that says a lot about a person's character and their commitment to doing the job that they're in. Lena served, like I said, for 3 decades on the school committee, never ran or never intended to run for any other public office. Her commitment was to the kids of this community. Never had any political aspirations other than to helping the kids of this community, and that's what she did for 3 decades. Lena is also the longest-serving member of the Medford School Committee. She was a strong advocate for the Medford Vocational Technical High School back when the school was, to be quite frank with you, lacking the technology and shops. And Lena was one of the key people that stood up back some 20, 25 years ago about improving the vocational school. So she was a leader in that aspect, and now we see a school that is really state-of-the-art and one we can all be proud of. The Curtis Tufts High School. Lena realized early on when that program came about that not every child has the opportunity to go on to college. Not every child does well in high school, and this was an opportunity that was given to students that may not get their diploma if the Curtis Tufts did not exist. And you can count on Lena being there at every Thanksgiving meal that they had, and she was a strong advocate of the Curtis Tufts Alternative High School. She was a big supporter of the Fine Arts Department, in particular the high school band. She was the past president of the Friends of Chevalier. She was instrumental in the building of the new schools. I served with Lena when we built the new schools, and if you think that wasn't a tough time, that was a difficult time going from neighborhood schools to having centralized schools. And Lena was one of the educational leaders in this community that led the charge, Mr. President. She also served with distinction as PTA president for a number of years. She was selected by the directors of the Mass Association of School Committees Incorporated and received the association's Lifetime Achievement Award. Lena received the Women's Achievement Award from the Human Rights Commission. She was a recipient of the Tip of the Hat Award from the Salem Street Business Association. She received the Golden Mustang Award for supporting the students of the Mustang athletic programs. She was instrumental in the planning and development of the Gene Mack Youth Center. She received the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post-1012 Award in appreciation of leading the charge to have the McGlynn School Auditorium named in honor of the veterans. She was honored at the Curtis Tufts Alternative High School graduation for many years of continued support. She received the Tony Lucci Golden Mustang Award for being an outstanding athletic program supporter. She served as past president of AARP, the Medford Chapter 1132. And the list goes on, and it really does. And I'm not going to mention everything. I would be remiss at this time because Lena's late husband, Al, as we all know him as affectionately, was a big part of Lena during the years that I served with her on the school committee, and he was a recognized Purple Heart recipient from the Korean War, and along with their 3 children that were all graduates of Medford High School, she raised a beautiful family, Mr. President, along with her role as an advocate in this community, and not just with the schools, with many, many organizations that I mentioned here tonight. And it is with great pride, Mr. President, that I offer this resolution to Lena as an outstanding member of the school committee, and I can attest to that, serving with her for 6 years, but also an outstanding member of this community, and in my opinion, a very, very good friend to many people in this community. And I would ask, as a resolution here tonight, that the school department dedicate, in her honor, something within the public schools to show the appreciation of her service, 30 years of service. One quick story I remember when I first got on the school board, when we were looking to do the new schools, they invited the school committee to go around to the buildings to see the condition of the buildings. And I'll never forget some of the meetings I attended, and some of the buildings we went in, seeing Lena climb up to the roof of the Franklin School was quite an interesting sight. And it was one of the many things that she took her job so serious, she could easily said, I'm not interested in going to the roof of this old rickety building and standing on the top of the roof. And there wasn't a staircase leading up there, by the way. It was a ladder. And she found it in herself to get up there because that's how interested she was and how dedicated she was to making sure that her vote was predicated on doing the right thing and making sure that she had firsthand knowledge. And I learned a lot from her in that spirit of time that I served with her. And I would ask that something be named, Mr. President, with the school department to honor Lena DeGentamaso for her 3 decades of service to this community.
Outstanding. I, for one, I've known Lena since I was probably 13, 14 years old, and up her house many times a year because I was very friendly with her daughter. And good woman, still see her occasionally. And remember, Lena worked at the Hilltop. You never waited in line when Lena was working. I always went in and saw Lena, she got you right in. Those were the old days when you had to wait for days to get in. On the motion.
I think we have a few people, Mr. President.
Would anybody like to say anything further?
Anyone?
Name and address for the record, please.
I don't think your mic's not on me. Maybe your mic's not on.
Sorry, okay.
First of all, congratulations, President Caraviello and Vice President Della Russa, and a Happy New Year to all of you. I had the pleasure of working with Lena on many, many community projects. As Councilor Marks said, if there was something happening in the city, you can be sure that Lena was going to be involved in that. And although she has, over time, received quite a lot of significant recognitions, I wholeheartedly support your proposal. And I think one of the most prestigious awards that she received was from the Massachusetts Association of School Committee when she was given the Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't believe any other person in this city ever was honored. And also, I believe she was the first woman, now that women are in the newspapers these days, she was the first woman to receive the Golden Mustang Award. And my working with her very, very closely during the founding and development of the Friends of Chevalier and Gene Mack Gym, Lena was just amazing. I mean, if she decided she was going to do something, she was actually the driving force behind our fundraising efforts. And over the years, I would say, I know for a fact that when she headed that up, every one of the fundraisers were hugely successful. And without a doubt, she raised in excess of $100,000 through the fundraising campaigns. And all of that money was given she raised over $100,000 for both the theater and the Boys and Girls Club. And all of that money has been given to those operations. So the city of Medford can be very, very proud that Lena was a part of us. And I certainly, as I say, I certainly would like to see something happen to give her an honor from the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also was contacted today by some friends who worked alongside of Lena and myself, and that couple was Bruce and Amy Folk. They are currently in the process of moving from Cotting Street to Melrose. But she sent me an email and asked me if I would read this on her behalf. Bruce and I have known Lena DeGentamaso for many, many years. First got to know her through the Friends of Chevalier and Gene Mack Gymnasium, We worked together on various committees and many fundraising ventures. Lena's dedication and devotion to the city of Medford and the young people of the city is a tribute for us all. Her strength, her enthusiasm, her hard work, her eagerness, always to be there whenever anything or anyone had a question or needed anything. Lena would always be there to listen and help whenever possible. Lena always insisted on doing and getting the best for our city of Medford, and especially the young people of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, May. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Robert Emmett Scarry Jr., 72 Terrace Road, Medford. I, along with Michael, had the honor and privilege of serving with Lena on the school committee, and I think one of her greatest accomplishments was when we decided to beef up the vocational school and do a few things that were unconventional at the time. I said to Lena, why don't we see if we can institute a culinary arts program? And through a lot of arm bending and work behind the scenes, it became a fruition. And just last month, Councilor, you and I had the opportunity to see what that program, how it started, and where it is today with their brand new cafeteria. Lena and I were fortunate enough in 2010 to be granted life membership in the Mass Association of School Committees. And during my tenure on the school board, I think there was no person that offered more help, more insight, and had some great ideas. And like people have said, she was always there for the kids. That was her first priority, even long after her own children were gone from Medford High. And I would hope that you would pass this on to the new school committee and see that they act with due diligence and name something respectfully after Mrs. DeGentamaso.
Thank you. Mr. Scarry, if you could stay for a second. If we could, while we have Mr. Scarry here, we could offer congratulations and for your years of service to the children, similar to Lena, over 26 years of service, Mr. Scarry?
Yes.
As a school committee, and I thank you for your years of dedication to the children of Medford also.
I'm just wondering where the time went. On a lighter note, when I first ran for the school board back in 1985, Lena and I were battling out for the 6th seat on the school board. Election night, I won by 1 vote. She had a recount. I ended up losing by 1 vote. Came back the following time, was elected, and I had a great run, and best to you all. And it was a pleasure serving with Michael and all my former colleagues, and I wish Mrs. DeGentamaso well.
And we can do the same for you, Mrs. Scarry, but thank you for your years of service to the community. Good evening. Name and address on the record, please.
Thank you. Ken Kraus, 50 Mystic Street. I'm a member of the board of directors of the Friends of Chevalier. I got to know Lena when I started to get involved with the Friends, probably around 2004 or so. And it's been a few years since she stepped down from her active role with the Friends and also the school committee, but it's never too late to say thank you to somebody for all their contributions to the community. And I think it's especially fitting this year for a couple of reasons. One is the 25th anniversary, 2018, of the founding of the Friends of Chevalier. And as was mentioned, Lena had an important role. I don't know if she was a founding member, probably was, but very instrumental in bringing the theater back from a condition that was, deplorable and perhaps, in jeopardy of the theater remaining as a viable venue. And look where it is today. She was an advocate for the city to invest in the building, well, to save the building, first of all, and to also invest in the building, for the state legislature to approve significant funding for the renovations, and was instrumental in the fundraising on behalf of the Friends as well. So, she really believed in the theater and its viability as a venue that would bring economic vitality to the community and be a place for outstanding performances for the arts. So working hand in hand with the commission, they brought really Chevalier to the point where we see what's happening with it today. You know, a lot of the naysayers said, oh, it's too big to be successful. No company would ever come in here and run it without, you know, being paid a fortune, and no company would ever come in and essentially pay the city for the opportunity to use this venue. And look what's happened. Bill Blumenreich presents, entered into an agreement with the city this fall and is investing his own money, putting in a sound system, putting in new lighting, putting in new box office facilities, improving the sight lines, putting up money to bring in top-notch shows that are selling out this theater. Today, the 5th performance was added for comedian Gabriel Iglesias in February. So there are numerous shows that have already sold out and additional shows have been added. So the work of people like Lena, others on the Friends, others on the commission, really brought the theater to the point where it was able to take this leap to the next level. And I support whatever could be done to recognize Lena, particularly something at the school, and you know, not only to thank her, but if there's something visible at the school, I think it would inspire future generations of public servants that will learn about Lena and what she contributed to the community when they pass through those halls. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? On the motion by Councilor Marks.
Roll call vote, Mr. President.
Seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice President Dela Russo.
Yes.
Councilor Falco.
Yes.
Councilor Knight. Yes. Councilor Curran.
Yes.
Councilor Marks.
Yes.
Councilor Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Caviola.
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. Motion by Councilor Knight to suspend the rules, seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. All those in favor? Motion passes. 18010. Dear Mr. President, City
Mr. President, motion to waive a reading of the paper and have a brief synopsis given by the presenter.
On the motion by Councilor Knight for a brief synopsis. Good evening. Name and address to the record, please.
Good evening, Councilors. Alicia Nunley Benjamin, Finance Director for the City of Medford.
Roberta Cameron, Chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. Sorry.
Danielle Evans, Community Preservation Coordinator.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to go first?
Okay. I'll go first.
Okay.
Paper 18010 is actually the fiscal year 17 revenues. I know the council did vote fiscal year 18, but you didn't get to see fiscal year 17, as that was our first year, so I automatically had to reserve it, and then it had to go through DOR before it could be appropriated. That's what this paper's for.
Thank you. The purpose for this is to reserve the minimum 10% as is required under the CPA legislation in each of the program areas, and the remaining balance is to be can be appropriated for any of the program areas. Thank you.
Did you want to speak?
Do you have anything to add?
No, just if there's any questions.
Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, so it's my understanding that annually 10% needs to be appropriated to each program area where the CPA was up and running, but our ordinance wasn't in place until a little bit later on in the year. I believe what happened is we were able to address fiscal year 18, but fiscal year 17's money was not appropriated. So it's my understanding that by approving this appropriation, we'll be in compliance with the Community Preservation Act.
On the motion by Councilor Knight. Seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor?
Roll call vote.
Mr. Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Vice President Dela Russo. Yes. Councilor Falco.
Yes.
Councilor Knight.
Yes.
Councilor Curran.
Yes.
Councilor Marks. Yes. Councilor Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Caviola.
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're under suspension, Mr. President. We have paper 18-011 also on the table.
18011. Dear Mr. President, City Councilors, I respectfully request that you and your honorable body approve the recommendations of the Community Preservation Committee to appropriate up to $300,000 from the Community Preservation Act funds for the purpose of funding Phase 1 of the Harris Park Rehabilitation Project in order to meet the deadline for committing the matching funds for the anticipated federal land and water conservation grant, and is identified in the Community Preservation Plan as a high priority recreation project. This appropriation will be allocated to the open space category in the amount of $123,281 and funded from the General Reserve category in the amount of $176,719. This project will be tracked in the Community Preservation Fund. Roberta Cameron, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and Daniel Evans, Community Preservation Coordinator, are present to answer any questions that we may have.
Thank you.
Name and address for the record again.
Roberta Cameron, 12 North Street.
Daniel Evans, Community Preservation Coordinator.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Any questions or?
If you could explain what's happening there.
So the Office of Community Development submitted a request for us to consider an off-cycle application for a project to match a federal grant rehabilitating Harris Park. And the purpose for the off-cycle application was because the OCD anticipates that the city will have to commit the funding to complete the project during the month of January at some point. So imminently, the city is going to have to commit the resources in order to be able to accept the federal grant. So the community preservation funds would have to be committed before any other city funds could be committed to the project. So they asked us if we would support the use of community preservation funds for this project. We felt that the project, so the community preservation application process allows for an off-cycle applicant where it is a high priority project that has a substantial purpose for urgency that needs to be considered outside of this cycle. And we felt that this proposal, this request, met both of those criteria, that there's a reason why the funds would need to be committed before we consider the other applications in the pipeline, and this is a high priority project. According to the plan that we carried out over the past 6-7 months, we identified community needs through a public process, through coordinating with various departments and boards and committees and community organizations to get input about what the needs are. And some of the goals and priorities that were identified were to commit funds to serve underserved neighborhoods and populations, which this proposal does. To leverage funding from other sources, which this proposal does. I don't have all of the goals, but we had given previously, when we came to the City Council, a summary of our goals and recommendations, or the goals and priorities that we identified in our process, and specifically pertaining to open space and recreation, improving access to open space and recreation resources, and providing diverse recreation opportunities serving residents of all ages. So this project fulfills our goals and the priority to improve access, safety, and function of our existing recreation resources, which this project does. So we felt that this project meets the criteria for to be considered a high priority for CPA funding. The amount of city match that was requested, I believe, was $516,000 to match a federal grant of $300,000. And given the fact that this is coming before we've had the opportunity to see what other projects are in the pipeline, we wanted to be conservative in the amount that of CPA funds that we committed to the project. So we elected to match the federal grant and ask that the city find funding from other sources to match the remainder of the needs for this project. And that represents we're only, for the first round of funding that we intend to recommend in May to the City Council, we are looking at the FY17 revenues that you've just approved, the reserving the program areas for. That's $1.2 million in total funding. So to evenly allocate that funding between each of the 3 program areas would be about $400,000 for each program area. So our recommending $300,000 toward open space and recreation for this project still leaves some funding available for other open space and recreation projects, and to provide an even amount of funding for the 3 program areas altogether. So that's a long synopsis of how we got to make this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle? Mr. President, do you want to say anything?
No, she pretty much covered it. But I just wanted to add that about the equal distribution of the funding. I think based on the forms, the eligibility determination forms that we've received, I believe that it's not going to be like very heavy on the recreation open space projects. So I do think that there will be price-efficient funds to go around for any recreation open space projects that were coming down the pipeline, as well as to fund this at $300,000.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, I think that the intricacies and the inner workings of the CPA are very interesting, but people, if we're going to be spending $300,000, want to know what that $300,000 is going to go for. In our packet, we have a letter from our Economic Development Planner, Claudia Stoker-Long, and this is a 2-phase project, Mr. President, to rehabilitate Harris Park. And phase 1 will include new play equipment for children ages 2 to 5 and 5 to 12, a rope climber, a water play area, a nature play area, a swing alley, a community garden, site furnishings, plantings and signage, and accessible parking improvements. Phase 2 will involve the rehabilitation of the fields to provide a new softball field, space for 3 junior soccer fields, an area for a farmer's market or a similar community use. It will also include a rain garden and additional accessibility improvements and street edge improvements and plantings along the edge of Middlesex Avenue. Mr. President, says here that the total cost of phase 1, including design and construction oversight, is estimated at about $817,000. The $300,000, which would be reimbursable through the Land Water Conservation Fund. And it looks like, Mr. President, if in fact this appropriation is made this evening, there will be a $217,000 balance to complete the requirements of phase 1 of the project, and the city will continue to seek land and water or park grants to fund phase 2 of the project. Mr. President, it seems like it's quite an endeavor, but having been down Harris Park all fall long with my kid being enrolled in soccer for the first time in his life, it's a park that needs a little bit of TLC. It needs a little bit of love, and it's, I think, a highly trafficked park, Mr. President. It actually has a lot more access and a lot more involvement down there than most of the other parks that we see in the community. So this is an endeavor that I think needs to be examined thoroughly, but I certainly think it's a worthwhile cause, Mr. President. So with that being said, I rest.
Councilor Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. Thank you for your hard work. I don't know if my questions are for you or for the city, but with regards to the $300,000 that potentially will be used from CPA, is there a certain match? What's the percentage of the match for the grant? Is that 36?
So the land and water grant is $300,000. So the committee elected to recommend that CPA funds match the land and water grant 1-to-1. So to match $300,000 for the land and water grant.
So how are we going to be paying? This isn't a question for the CPA, but for the $217,000, what is our plan? I think maybe the city.
I don't have an answer yet.
If I may, Claude Stokelov,
Thank you.
the Office of Community Development. I don't know. I will give you a direct answer, and then I will go backwards. I spoke to the mayor today about how we would look to fund the balance of $217,000. We will, when we get the official confirmation we get it through the state of the land and water funding, we will come to you like we come again and again with a presentation asking you to accept the funding and accept the grant and to appropriate the funds, the whole lot of the funds for the park. That's, the way that these grant systems work. At that time, we will ask you to appropriate the additional $217,000, or $100,000. And I spoke to the mayor today, and she said it's very likely that we will ask you to appropriate that from free cash. That isn't definite, but that's what she said is likely.
Okay, so either bond or free cash. Is there a potential that we'll request part of the next funding from CPA to put in another application?
For the next phase 2, I think, I would...
Is that a possibility?
Yes, I would anticipate that this is a source of funds for open space, and I would anticipate that we will ask the CPA to help with important recreational projects.
So, and what else is on the line that you know of in the next year or two? Harris Park obviously needs the rehab. What else? What other parks?
Would be phase 2 of Harris Park. We'll do phase 1, hopefully.
Yep.
And then there'd be phase 2, which would make which would complete the park, complete rehab of the park. And
what other parks are?
The open space plan is due for to be updated.
It's been 5 years.
It's actually now 7, but we've gotten to the 7. So by August of this year, we need to have a new open space plan. So we'll need to do the whole process of information gathering and getting goals and objectives, as well as assessing the value, the state of the various parks. And so that will create a new list of priorities, if you like. We usually just move down through the priorities, that are set, by that planning process. And of course, the CPA has also done their own planning process, which in fact, obviously, the people say the same things. So very often, our priorities, the priorities in the open space plan are quite like those in the community preservation plan.
But the city would be applying for any parks that are city-owned. The city would be applying for the CPA, and we don't have any plans in the next year or two besides Harris Park, phase 1 and phase 2, until we do the open space assessment in August, which isn't going to really lead into if there's another park that's designated as needing rehab, that would not even be till the 2019 cycle. So potentially we could ask CPA we could put in an application for the CPA funds for the second cycle.
Yes.
That's my question. Thank you. I think this is definitely a project that needs to be done. This is exactly where I envision CPA monies going. My question, putting this project aside, is how did the vote go down with regards to taking something out of cycle?
Our committee members voted. I believe there were 8 people present at our previous meeting, all but one.
All but one.
And there was one person who voted in the negative. Everyone else voted for it. And his concerns were about taking this out of order. He felt that this was a good project, but felt uncomfortable with the very first project that we do being taken out of order or being accelerated. Felt that if the timing were otherwise, he would get behind it very easily. Mm-hmm. So that was a difficult decision for the committee to wrap our heads around, because we want to maintain the appearance that this funding is available for anybody in the community who needs it. And that's what drove us to find an amount that we felt comfortable with making available, leaving funds available for other applicants.
So can you tell the council, when was the application given to the committee originally, and was a full application provided from the city?
Yes, we had a full application received by CLOTA.
And when was that?
The 19th? It must have been the 19th. Yes.
Oh, really? So very recently?
Yes.
And that's time-wise because this application for the grant is due?
The grant application was actually submitted originally. It goes through a strange sort of process. Submitted to the state, who decide whether they're going to support it or not. And then they send it to the National Park Service. Now the state, so it was submitted to the state last February. They decided by about maybe say August to submit it to the National Park Service with a recommendation to fund it. And they tell us that they're 99% sure that we will be funded, that they have never been turned down. And of course you can't know until it's in your hand. But I expect in the next month, I can't absolutely to get a letter saying, congratulations, you've been awarded the funding, now please go to the council and get your acceptance and the funding up front. So that's why this has happened in this order. And as I said, when we get the letter, we will be coming in front of you with a presentation about the park and all the details. I also have brought just a little handout that I took out of the application to the CPA with just some graphics and the budget if you're interested in having it.
Sure, yeah. I think I understand why you had one in the negative. So it is a difficult decision, but I think this obviously needs to be done. So it's a hard vote, obviously, for the committee. I think is ultimately the ones that are doing all the work and put in their time and effort and sweat and tears into how much you do is commendable. I see an issue with taking applications out of order, but I see both sides. I want to just voice that concern. Yeah. Doing that often. I want to make sure that even though we have $2 million come very, very soon in this fund, I just feel like everybody should have a fair shot. It should be, obviously, I asked for an extension on the application process, and I just think we're walking a fine line, and hopefully won't,
I appreciate that, and it is also, I think, important to have, as we wrote in the application process, the opportunity for applicants to come in off-cycle, as this application was, because there are opportunities that will be very important down the line. Meeting a grant cycle is one example of the kind of project that might not align with what our timeline is, and if we wanted to acquire property perhaps for open space or for affordable housing, property acquisition is often something that needs to be done on a very fast timeline that doesn't match. So there are reasons why that can happen. It was a little bit uncomfortable that this was our first application. So even though we anticipated that we were going to need to be able to consider applications out of order, we weighed very carefully this particular one.
In my last question, I guess, or point, has the committee discussed, like you just mentioned, a few scenarios where you have to take them out of order when you have a grant or you have a land acquisition? Have you discussed or created a checklist of why you would take an application out of order, just so it's something to follow, and when you come back to us next time, we know, you're trying to acquire this piece of land, or there's a grant that needs to be written in time. I mean, just so we can feel better about this decision as well, confirming your vote.
At the moment, we have, and perhaps it's a little bit informal and we could improve on the procedure, but we did specify that it should be a high priority project, and that there should be a defensible reason why it needs to be considered off-cycle. Those were the only two criteria that we considered at this point, but we would take suggestions if there are further criteria that we ought to include in our process.
I would just think maybe even just at your next meeting, you designate 10, 15 minutes to discuss it. I think anything given to you by the mayor's office or anybody, any organization, their project is going to be high priority, Yeah,
high priority by the standards that are established in our plan, not by necessarily the urgency felt by the applicant.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, Berta, thank you, your team doing a great job with this. And we all know how Harris Park, the work it needs. I know that I receive phone calls right away with people, you know, what about car park? What about the baseball fields? And this is great because it starts a dialogue. And we express to people that I believe the deadline's coming up soon for the new round, the 15th, correct, of January?
For the 6th?
For the
This Friday.
5th, this Friday
This
for
Friday.
the eligibility determination forms
Right.
for the first round.
Right, first
and
round.
for the second round of funding, which will also be recommended in 2018, but in the fall, the project eligibility deadline, I believe, is in April.
I think it's April 13th.
Yes,
Okay.
April 13th.
One of the big pieces, I know, being part of the Recreation Committee that we put together, I think we should really pay close attention to making sure that part of these projects in the parks have inclusionary equipment for our special needs students. Is that spelled out in this? I don't know if the city can address that. I know the water is nice, but one thing that we talked about at the recreation meetings, we're trying to make more inclusionary parks and accessibility for our children.
This is a preliminary design, it's a concept plan, but any design we do is fully accessible. I mean, and has been for many, many years.
Right, but it would be what was expressed in those meetings, more of adaptive equipment. So
Well,
a child with a wheelchair, there with special equipment.
We'll say, when we get the grant, we will be coming to you.
Great.
And you will have an opportunity to have that input, just like we went last year. It was the same funding source last year for Riverside Plaza. We came to you, made comments, we tried to see if we could do some adaptations to make things work.
Excellent.
Similarly, when we get this, we'll come before you and we'll have the same interactive process.
But thank you. And again, I think this is what people were looking for when we, Roberta, started the dialogue with community preservation and looking into such important projects like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Roberta, you mentioned about other projects that are in the pipeline. At what point will this council see other projects that are in the pipeline and be able to see, in my opinion, to be helpful to see a comparison of what funding is available, what projects are in the pipeline, because it's great to get these projects piecemeal, and everyone supports. Harris Park is around the corner from my home. I know it needs work. Everyone supports this, but I also think it's important that we know what's out there, and there may come a time when you appear before us that we'd say, you know what, we realize this is important, but I also think creating more affordable housing in the city is equally as important, and maybe I'd like to pay more attention to that at this particular point. So at what point will we see as a council the total picture?
Do you have the full timeline? I didn't think to bring that. We have in the we have a timeline laid out of when all of the applications are due and when we anticipate bringing our full slate of recommendations for the first round and the second round of funding to the City Council. So we can keep you updated as we've received the applications as to what's in the pipeline, and there would be a public process and hearings that occur with our committee prior to our sending the recommendations or committing the recommendations to you.
If I could, is this the only application that you received from the city so far for the first round?
This is the only full application that we've received. So far, the eligibility determination forms are just more or less an intent to apply. That we initially had the deadline for the eligibility forms due prior to when this application was discussed by our committee. Now the eligibility determination forms are due in the end of this week. So before we meet again, we'll know what applications are potentially in the pipeline.
My question, Roberta, is on behalf of the city.
Yes.
Is this the only application you received so far on behalf of the city as a city entity?
Well, we haven't, this is the only application that we've received because the deadline is not until March. But for eligibility determination forms,
so no one else asked for early acceptance? No one else said?
No, because I don't think anyone else is on a timeline where they have to get a match before their grant is awarded. I'm not sure what the other funds that are being leveraged for the other projects, but we have received forms from the Community Garden Commission for 4 different gardens. I don't believe that they're going to apply for all 4, but they wanted to, make sure that they want to get it out there first, make sure that it's eligible, and then decide later which ones to apply for. So they applied. We have the Historical Commission has submitted, I think it was 7 or 9 eligibility determination forms. They also don't intend to submit full applications for all of those, but they, for planning purposes, to get all their ducks in a row, to have several month lead time to know which ones are worth filling out a complete application form to know what's eligible. So, and we also are expecting one from the mayor's office for the Condon Shell. But those are the ones that I know offhand that are City of Medford projects.
As Councilor Longo-Kern mentioned, knowing that there's a set amount of money, do you think that we're opening the floodgate to other recipients or potential recipients saying, you know what, we don't want to sit back and wait. We want to make ours as urgent as everyone else, get in there early, do what we have to do to be ahead of the curve. Do you think we open ourselves up for that by accepting something before?
My sense from talking with other committee members is that they feel they're very conservative about considering an early application or an off-cycle application, that they want to see a very defined legitimate purpose for the off-cycle application, that the reason why the funding would need to be committed prior to when everybody else's funding is committed, there's a hard outside deadline, externally imposed deadline that drives that early application. It's not just that they thought of it before everyone else, but it's because something else from outside is causing them to have to make that commitment now as opposed to later. And as I said, it's only something that we would consider for something that meets the high priority as defined in the planning process that we undertook. So the possibility is there, but I think that unless that external deadline applies to a project, they're going to be asked to get in the regular stream on cycle with the other applicants.
Good, thank you.
Councilor Del Russo.
Mr. President, I think we need to be certain of our intentions here, because we're committing ourselves to a portion of this project needs, and there still remains a balance of $176,000, $177,000 nearly. If I'm correct in reading this, 217 that we've been informed by someone who may or may not be authorized to inform us of that it's going to be asked for from free cash. So I hope when it comes time to make that expenditure that we'll go through with it. Secondly, I wonder sometimes if since there's been such a call in the past to not pass these proposals that are sent to us for the first time, why that concern isn't being raised, but I am in favor of this, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. One question about the applications. The applications or the forms that do come in, are those going to be go public? Are we going to be able to check them out online before you discuss them?
Yes, it's all public information, so I was waiting until the deadline this Friday to aggregate everything and put it at least on the preservemedford.org
on your website. Okay.
Yes, we would host it and have them all there.
And then just through the chair, I'm not sure the city said we were definitely going to be taking this out of free cash. It sounded like we... It's possible. But will we be putting in, and I guess, will we be putting in another application for CPA funding for the remaining?
Not for this project. I mean, not for phase one.
Not for phase one, but for phase two, potentially, for the
Yes.
217,000.
And we'll be on time. We, at that stage, we should be on time because we should not be out of cycle, although we won't know if we're likely to get a grant. For instance, if there's a funding cycle, we'll say from the park program in March.
Okay, I think I read this wrong.
An application to the park program, submit an application to the CPA, and I wouldn't get the decision from the park program. That the CPA could make their decision with all the other decisions, and then when the park program came through, we could put it all together. So I think that this will be the only major off-cycle application, because I think they will be anticipation rather than having a very good idea if you're getting matching funding. But for instance, I could, for instance, make an application for park funding in March, also make a CPA for the following October, and then maybe in usually park funds you're told about October and November if you're getting them. And so it would line up in a different way than this is. This is an exceptional circumstance, because this is the first year of the CPA and all that.
Okay, thank you. I think I read it wrong. I thought both phases were the 817, and you wouldn't need the 217 till phase two. But I guess when I look at the sentence again, so phase two, do we know how much that is going to cost?
There's a concept plan, and again, that looks at the moment about $600,000, but that we're not. That's phase two. We have to deal with phase one first. And we have, the concept plans for phase one, and that's what we're pursuing at the moment. When we did the, last February, when we did the concept for the whole park, then we realized we'd have to bring it, divide it into two pieces, because the grants that are available generally are, in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, and also they're reimbursable usually. And park, land and water, which we're hopefully getting for this, is a 50% reimbursement. So, for instance, to get 300, you need to spend at least 600 of what they call eligible expenses. At the moment, park is 60% reimbursement. So, again, the figure is related. So to answer your question, I think this is phase one.
817,000 is phase one.
But that includes design and construction oversight. And very often when we come to you, we have already funded design, or we've started the design. And very often when we get to a stage, and it's usually a major problem for us, when we go into construction, we have no money for construction oversight, and we have no contingency, and we are really in a bind. This is, the proposal is to properly fund this so that we can actually do the project.
Good. Councilor Marks.
Clodagh.
Yes.
In previous grants that we've received, matching grants, we always had to show where we're going to get the funding from. Correct?
That's what happens when we come to you, when we get when we get the letter saying we're awarded. We come to you, and when you do the vote, you would vote to accept the grant and to appropriate the funds. And that has to be, that's one vote, and that has to be sent to the state before they will actually sign the grant contract.
But I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. When you say accept the funds, that is from the matching grant? So we have to vote to accept the matching grant?
That's correct.
But we also have to take a vote to approve this tonight, right?
That's right.
And when you go back to apply for the matching grant, all you're going to have at that particular time is what we're voting on tonight, and that doesn't cover the full project.
Yes, so
or at least
when we come to you, we'll say in a month or 6 weeks, we will be asking you for another $217,000.
Correct. I understand that, but are you going to be, between now and then, are you going to be applying for the...
No, I've applied for it. You put in the application, and then you wait till they say, here we are, we're going to award it to you, and then we come to you, because there's no point in asking you for money if we don't know we're getting a match, because you're going to say no. So that's the way, when we know we're getting the money, then we come to you to say, please accept the money and front, please accept the grant and front the total amount.
Right. So what's the urgency of voting on this tonight, then?
If the CPA money has to be allocated in advance of us coming to you with the grant application, because once the city allocates money, then it cannot be replaced with CPA money. And that's why you have to get the CPA in place first.
Okay, and what happens if the other $200,000 doesn't come to fruition?
We're in trouble. You know, we need the project. The council is basically the body who controls whether this project will happen or not, because they approve the funds.
Right. And you're saying phase 2 is another $600,000, so we're looking at about $1 million?
At the moment. That's not designed or anything now, but we'd be looking to come maybe next year for phase 2. This is hypothetical at the moment, but that's, I'm trying to be, as direct with you as I can and telling you as much as I know.
So why aren't we being asked to vote for the free cash tonight also? I mean, if you're going to get a commitment to use funds for CPA, so that means this body supports the concept, why wouldn't we be asked to?
We could have done that, but you might be reluctant to do that when you haven't got the grant in your hand. You know what you'd say, well, why? Because when you appropriate the money, then you've appropriated what on the off chance. I don't believe this for a second is going to happen. We didn't get the park grant, it's land and water. Then you would have allocated money, and it gives you a sense of security that the project is definitely going to happen before you allocate the additional funds.
Okay. And if we don't get the grant, that money just goes back into the CPA?
I don't actually, yes. But I don't believe for a second that we won't get the grant. I've been told by the coordinator of the state that she's 99% sure, but she cannot absolutely say it until she gets the letter.
I just wanted to answer, if CPA funds are appropriated for a project and not used for that project, they can be returned to the pool that's available for other projects. Shall be returned, yes.
Wasn't the vote conditioned?
Yes.
Yeah, you can always vote to rescind back to the category in which you program the money.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. One quick question on what you just mentioned. So does that money automatically go back in? Does it automatically go into that same bucket that it came out of?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That's actually why we specifically tell you which bucket it's coming out of, so that we know which bucket to put it back into should it ever occur on this or any future project.
That's fine. I just want to get confirmation, just because it seemed, the way you said it just seemed funny, but I just wanted to make sure. So it goes back into the same bucket it came out of, and it can be used in the future.
For that purpose, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've been down to Harris Park a number of times, and I think it's definitely a park that needs some work. We have a lot of parks that need some work, but I know that park does need a lot of work, and I think it's definitely a worthy project, so thank you.
Councilor McCurran.
Thank you, President Carviello. I just want to check in on this $817,000 figure. Is that what you're submitting to the state? Can that change at all? I mean, could it go down, or could we? reduce the project at all?
Well, we applied to the state for, let me see, something like, I think it was 667. You can only get 300. You see, you can only, the maximum grant available in this cycle is $300,000.
Okay.
So you have to
spend the 667.
You have to apply for at least 6.
At least 6, yeah.
And it has to be eligible. And there are things that are not eligible that you need in a project. For instance, construction oversight. The clerk of the works is not an eligible expense. Police details are not an eligible expense. So if you spend that, you have to have money for that because the state will not reimburse that. And that's why the money is more.
667 plus the overs.
Yes,
okay.
plus, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, I, as one member of this body, very excited to see that the CPA is moving forward. I think that when the CPA ballot question was put to the test for the voters, that this is what they envisioned happening. It's what I envisioned happening as well, where the community comes together and they put together a plan and work together to come up with a goal. And I really think this is a great plan. I think it's a bold plan. I think it's an expensive plan, but I think it's worthwhile, and I think it's a project that deserves to be funded. It has great merit. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I move for approval on the paper.
On the motion by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Dela Russo. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice President Dela Russo. Yes. Councilor Falco.
Yes.
Councilor Knight.
Yes.
Councilor Kern.
Yes.
Councilor Marks.
Yes.
Councilor Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Caviola.
Yes. 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. Thank you. 18-012. Dear President Caraviello, members of the Medford City Council, recently the city was informed that Medford will be the site of the filming of certain segments of a television production called City on a Hill. Yes, we are. Location manager Ryan Cook and his staff have been in contact with various city officials regarding these filming activities. At this time, it is anticipated that one of the filming days will be January 16th. The production staff has advised Director of Public Health Department that it anticipates having a food truck preparing food for its crew in the parking lot of the VFW. I respectfully request that the council endorse an approval of food trucks for this production as it has done in the past year. Thank you. On the motion by Councilor Dela Russo, Councilor Knight.
Yes, Mr. President, just my understanding that this is a food truck that's going to be not open to the public, but just open to the staff of the crew that's working on the film.
That is correct.
With that being said, I second Councilor Dela Russo's motion.
On the motion by Councilor Dela Russo, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Motion by Councilor Knight to revert back to regular business. Seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor? Motion passes. 18-007, offered by Councilor Marks. Be it resolved that the sidewalk on the corner of Bradshaw and Honeywell be replaced in the interest of public safety. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular sidewalk panel has been an ongoing problem for a number of years. There's a small shade tree that is pushing up the panel. One of the residents actually tripped and got seriously hurt on this particular sidewalk. So I would ask that DPW immediately go out there and review the issue in the interest of public safety.
On the motion by Councilor Marks, seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. All those in favor? Motion passes. 18-008, offered by Councilor Falco. Whereas resident students are forced to walk in the street when traversing city-owned sidewalks during and after snowstorms, be it resolved that the City of Medford purchase a trackless plow or snow removal apparatus to remove snow from city-owned sidewalks and property during inclement weather, and give our DPW department the tools that they need to succeed. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an item that I have brought before the council before in the past, and the council supported it unanimously in the past and has not been included in past budgets. And it's something that I've strongly advocated for before, and I continue to do so. We expect our, residents to clear their sidewalks. After it snows, and the city should be doing the same thing with regard to city properties and sidewalks as well. And we see our students, they walk to and from school, residents walk when it snows out, and it's important to keep our sidewalks clean of snow, and it's basically a public safety issue. And now when you bring the Chevalier Theater on board now with running shows during the winter and whatnot, we're asking people to walk from the parking lots here at City Hall to Chevalier Theater, and that's another reason why we should have basically a piece of machinery like this that can clear the snow. And it's important that we give our city workers, the DPW workers, the tools that they need. And I'm happy to say that we received the paper tonight from the mayor's office, and I'll read it. It's in response to the resolution that I offered, and it's from it's from Brian Kerrins, the Commissioner of Public Works, and it's in response to Councilor Falco Resolution 18-008. After meeting with Mayor Stephanie M. Burke on Thursday, December 28th, regarding the purchase of a trackless plow for the Department of Public Works to better clear sidewalks during the winter months, we will be purchasing one for $130,545. The machine is called the Holder, and it is made in Canada. The local dealer for this machine is in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. The machine will have a snowblower attachment, a power reversible plow blade, and a dump body and a sander unit. So happy to say that this issue sounds like it's being addressed. Mr. President, if you wouldn't mind, if we could get just further answer with regard to the timing on this, when this will, when we should actually see this piece of machinery here in our city, and when we could actually may possibly see it in service. So,
thank you. Councilor Longo-Kern.
Thank you, President Carviello. I want to thank Councilor Falco and second the resolve. Definitely need this piece of equipment sooner than later. He brought up a good point, and we all discussed it at our meeting with regarding the Chevalier Theater. And the last several weeks, our sidewalks haven't really, they're doing the best they can, but I think it's really, they're definitely shoveled out, and I see our DPW out there working hard, but with regards to this apparatus and having a sander on it, it's something that we so desperately need, and it will definitely help everybody traverse our sidewalks. Having the shows coming in, that's important, but we also have everyday customers and business owners traversing our sidewalks in the squares, and they need to be shoveled and sanded, and hopefully this will go a very long way and help out the department of the DPW to make sure we clear every square and sidewalk that we can, especially those two that are the children that are going to school. And I've got complaints already with regards to children heading to school, having to go onto the street, putting obviously their safety in jeopardy. So this is extremely important, and hopefully it will go a very long way in every snowstorm.
Thank you. Councilor Knight.
Move approval, Mr. President.
Councilor Scarpelli.
Again, thank you, Mr. President. Thank Councilor Falco for bringing that up, and I know that Ken Kraus is in the crowd tonight. One thing we've all worked on is working with the school system, especially. Ken traverses the Brooks area, and that's one of the hot spots that we always get phone calls from and I think that what we really need to is make sure that there's a collaboration and there's discussion with both the city and the school side in making sure that these areas are done, and there's a line of communication open between both departments. Not to say there isn't, but sometimes they do fall through the cracks. We're expecting, and I know that even this Thursday, they've increased it to 12 to 15 inches for this Thursday, and getting those areas taken care of as soon as possible. So if we could add that to the part of the resolutions, make sure that the DPW director and the director of buildings and grounds from the schools can work on a plan for this upcoming storm to make sure these common areas are taken care of. I know that unfortunately probably won't be here by Thursday, so I just wanted to make sure that that was out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Scarpelli. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you again. Ken Kraus, 50 Mystic Street. I wanted to speak in support of this resolution. I'm pleased to hear that the city has responded so quickly. I think the need is increased recently, and particularly, as you've heard, we're doing a lot of investing in our parks, our squares. We have a very active Walk Medford community. We have a very active bicycle commission. The Mystic River Watershed Association is putting a lot of emphasis behind completing the Mystic Greenways network. Some of those trails that we're seeing come online are the responsibility of the city, some are not. So this will be helpful where we need to use the device at the parks and the trails that we're responsible for. But we're just going to be seeing a lot more people using the sidewalks and using the trails where this will be used. So I'm glad to see this is brought forward. And also, I know from my past experience with the transition team on the Recreation Subcommittee, we got a tour of all the parks from Mike Nestor, the park foreman, and he had said at that time that for a number of years he has been strongly advocating for this type of a machine as well, so I know it'll be very welcomed. One of the things he pointed out, in addition to its value and utility, currently the city has to, or at least when we spoke 2 years ago, use a bobcat primarily for removing the snow from sidewalks and places like this, and that requires another truck and a trailer to take it and deliver it to the site to be used. Whereas this type of a machine is completely independent. It can run on its own and doesn't require the need for the truck and the trailer. The last question I had, and this kind of goes to along the lines of urgency for this. I'm glad we're thinking about it for next year's budget, but perhaps it could come even sooner. And my question would be, is this something that could be possibly eligible for linkage fee money to be used on? We hear a lot about linkage fees when they're required for developments, and a lot of developments are residential, and they bring into the community a lot of people that use the sidewalks and use the paths. A lot of younger people, a lot of people that are bicycle users, all kinds of people. And the linkage process is sort of mysterious to me as just a resident who, tries to pay attention to what's going on. I rarely see, if ever, any kind of meetings where they talk about the linkage money. You'll see on the Zoning Board of Appeals meetings, this project requires linkage money, but we never really hear how much came in and where it goes and what it's used for. I think maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the council might even have a seat on the linkage committee that decides.
Point of information, Councilor De La Russo.
The president of the city council is ex officio, a member of the linkage committee, and during my 2-year tenure as president, we met 3 times in properly noticed meetings with actual, what do we call them, minutes? Yes.
I'll investigate. It's good to know.
And I think under Mayor Burke, no, I never met, maybe I met once under Mayor McGlynn. Under Mayor Burke, we probably spent a good portion of it down on this type of the type of stuff of parks, public safety. It's parks, public safety, and one more.
Infrastructure related to the development that comes in. So my point was that
I've had a couple, Ken.
It could be eligible. I would like to know as a citizen what kind of money is available and if this is eligible, because if we don't need to put it in next year's budget, then perhaps that money could go toward additional personnel for the DPW, because perhaps this will be utilized a lot and
can't be used for people.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that this, if we buy the machine with linkage money, we could use the budget money for personnel. I know we can't use linkage money for personnel, so just wanted to raise that as a possibility to expedite hopefully getting this machine sooner than later. So thank you, Councilor Falco, for bringing that up.
Councilor Longo-Kern.
Maybe just as a side paper, we can get an update of how much money is in the linkage account currently.
On On the motion by Councilor Falco, as amended by Councilor Longo-Kern, seconded by Councilor Knight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Clerk, roll call has been requested by Councilor Falco.
Vice President Del Russo. Yes. Councilor Falco. Yes. Councilor Knight. Yes. Councilor Longo-Kern. Yes. Councilor Marks. Yes. Councilor Scarpelli. Yes. President Caraviallo.
Yes, 7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Motion passes. 18009, offered by Councilor Falco and Councilor Scarpelli, be it resolved that the Medford City Council extend its deep and sincere condolences to the family of Joseph Pace on his recent passing. Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just this past Christmas Eve, we lost a good friend in Joe Paci. He was a one-time Medford resident, lived up on Dunan Street for many years with his family, and owned Joe Paci and Son grocery store. And overall, just a great guy. I mean, good friend, great guy, and someone that was always there to help. And for many years, I mean, when he had moved out of Medford, he always found time to donate money, give to charitable organizations throughout our city. So he will be missed greatly, and thoughts and prayers to his family.
Thank you. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you. I know Councilor Falco, not to repeat, but Joe deserves it. Joe Paci was a wonderful Italian-American, often the strongest voice in the North End while they were going through the Big Dig, and a person that loved his job and loved his family. I know Angela and Joe and Joey and Cara, and spent a lot of time and donated a lot of time and effort in St. Francis Parish at the time, and Joe's passing will hurt. He was one of those individuals that left a mark, and I think everybody that you talked to had a positive story about Joe Paci, and I could say a few from my personal, but I'll leave that with the family and myself. So we'll miss him and send our condolences to the family.
Thank you. All rise, please. (18-013), offered by Councilor Knight, be it resolved that the Medford City Council requests the city administration provide a cost estimate for the implementation of an annual diversity training program for all employees within the city of Medford. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. With the number of new personnel that are coming on here in the community, and this council's commitment to diversity and to inclusion in the city, as well as that of the administration, and the hiring of a new director of diversity, I think that it only makes sense for us, Mr. President, to continue building upon the positive progress that we've made in the past. When Diane McLeod was the director of the Office of Diversity, she did have annual trainings for our city employees, whether it was a training module on the computer or a presentation, Mr. President, but I think it was very beneficial, and I think it's something that that should be pushed by the wayside. So I'm asking the administration to take the appropriate steps to provide the council with a cost analysis as to what it costs to provide an annual diversity training for the city employees, and then we can take appropriate steps to determine whether or not we want to codify this as an ordinance or request that it be done by executive order to ensure that it continues, Mr. President. So I'm asking my council colleagues to support this endeavor so that we can get a little bit more information about what it costs for us to be able to implement an annual diversity training for our city employees.
Second. On the motion by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Del Russo. All those in favor? Motion passes. 18-014, offered by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council requests directed patrols to enforce resident access restrictions on Hastings Lane with particular focus on the morning and evening commuting hours. Councilor Knight.
Yes, Mr. President. Unfortunately, the Waze app has found Hastings Lane, and there are many vehicles that would come from Winchester and cut right down Woburn Street and follow Woburn Street all the way to the end, and then cross over to High Street and go right down Hastings Lane, even though it says resident access only between 7 to 9. It's becoming a problem in the neighborhood. There are many young families that live in the neighborhood. It's not an easy street to get up and down. Portions of it are unpaved, portions of it are paved. Certain portions wouldn't allow two cars to traverse at the same time. And this lack of conscientiousness by certain commuters is causing an issue in the neighborhood, Mr. President. On Christmas Eve, I had the opportunity to visit a family friend over there like I do every year, and the conversation that I had with every member of the family revolved around the number of cars that are going down the street during the hours that they're not supposed to be going down there, never mind the speed. So I'm asking, Mr. President, for the Traffic Division to do a directed patrol at Hastings Lane, either at the top at High Street or at the bottom down on the Parkway, while the restrictions are in place, to see if we can catch some people going through the do not enter sign. If a person goes down a restricted access street like that, when they go down that street, that is a moving violation. It's a surchargeable offense. It goes on your registration. It goes on your insurance, Mr. President. So for individuals that want to save 5 minutes cutting down a street, they have to realize that 5 minutes that they're saving could cost them $700 a year for the next 7 years. I think that, there's a lack of conscientiousness and just ignorance, Mr. President, when it comes to some of these signs, and I think we're all guilty of it. We've all gone down a sign that might have said, resident access only before. I know I've done it on Rural Ave before. We've all done it. But ultimately, it's causing an issue in the neighborhood. It needs to be addressed, and I'm asking for some help from our police department.
Councilor, if I can amend that to ask if the police department has a way of contacting ways to have them come down and put them on notice of the signs on different streets. I don't know if Waze has a...
I would certainly be open to amending the paper as a B paper. I just don't want them to say that we can't contact Waze, so we're not going to do the directed patrol. So as long as it's a B paper and they have two separate tasks to move on, I'd be happy to do it, Mr. President.
I would ask that we send to Sergeant Hartman. I believe he has reached out to Waze regarding some streets on the sides. Yeah.
Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to mention that. I know he has some sort of contact or some way to reach out to Waze. He's done it in the past, and this is definitely something that I think we should definitely push in his direction, have him look into. It definitely needs to be addressed. It's amazing what that app has done to our city streets in our neighborhoods. And while we're on the topic, just to mention really quick, tomorrow night at the Lawrence Memorial Hospital School of Nursing is our next Medford Community Police meeting. So I just wanted to bring that up, but I thought it was appropriate to bring it up now, since we are talking about this issue here, and a lot of issues like this here are discussed during that type of meeting.
And the Lawrence Memorial Hospital is right down the street from Hastings Lane. So if anybody in Hastings Lane wants to go down to the hospital, let the chief know.
On the motion by Councilor Knight, on the B paper, that we contact, that Sergeant Hartnett contact Waze to see if they can update their software. Seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor?
Aye.
On the original paper, offered by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Mr. President, motion to take papers in the hands of the clerk.
Motion by Councilor Knight to take papers in the hands of the clerk, seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. 18015, offered by Councilor Scarpelli. Be it resolved, the Medford City Council sends their deep and sincere condolences to the family of John Bob Connor on his recent passing. Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the Connor family, well known in Spring Street area. Mr. Connor was a loving member of his community. He loved Medford. He was a member of the Mustang Association. He was also past board member of the Wellington Glenwood Little League. I grew up with his son, Sean, and Mr., as of yesterday's wake, had some great stories how Mr. Connor, up until last week, watched our program on Tuesday nights and made sure he always sent message in what he thought this council should be doing. So, and I appreciated that. He's a great person, great family, great Mustang, so he'll be missed. Thank you.
And we have another one here, offered by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council sends its deep and sincere condolences to the family of Dante DeFranco Sr. on his recent passing. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, yes, thank you very much. For any of us from West Medford, we'd all know Dante DeFranco. He'd be the best-dressed guy walking around West Medford Square, Mr. President. The construction worker that was always impeccably dressed and always someone that was willing to sit down and give you a hello and ask how you were doing down in West Medford Square. So with that being said, Mr. President, he suddenly passed away just over the past week, and I'd like to have my council colleagues join me in offering my condolences and our condolences to Mrs. DeFranco and Dante Jr. and Danielle and Dean as they go through this difficult time, especially during the holidays, Mr. President.
Thank you. And we have one last one, offered by Councilor Knight. Whereas January 6th, 2018 marks the 7th anniversary of the passing of lifelong resident of Medford, Vietnam veteran, community activist, and governor's councilor Michael J. Callahan. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council hold a moment of silence in his honor, and be it further resolved that the Medford City Council dedicate the 1/2/18 council meeting in memory of Michael J. Callahan, former governor's councilor. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Michael and I were very close friends. Michael was a mentor to me. He taught me a great deal about how government works, and I think when you look at Michael Callahan and his career in government, especially as a resident here of Medford who's been credited with the legend of saving Wrights Pond from development, his slogan in the 2005 Senate campaign summed up Michael Callahan, and Michael Callahan helped people. He helped people. That's what Michael did, and he sadly missed, Mr. President. I'd ask my colleagues to join me in a moment of silence and to dedicate tonight's meeting in his memory.
Please rise. Records. Records for the decisive meeting are passed to Councilor Marks. Excuse me, December 19th meeting. We'll pass to Councilor Marks. Councilor Marks, how did you find those records?
Review the records, Mr. President, find them to be an honor and approval.
On the motion by Councilor Marks to approve of the records, seconded by Councilor Scarpelli. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. On the motion by Councilor Scarpelli for adjournment, seconded by Councilor Knight. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.
The smog and the fog and the pollution has gripped the airport, and not many people have been getting in and out of the city. So,
oh dear.
Not a great New Year's start, I'm afraid to say.
No, indeed. I do worry for your health when you join us on Business Matters, Rahul. 'Cause I know you go out to the street because you get a better signal to be able to broadcast, but you do have to breathe in all of the fumes of the traffic.
I know, but it's now the cold air here, I'm afraid. It may be 20 degrees, but I have to say, quite a comical sight in Kolkata at the moment. It looks like a convention of bank robbers, as everybody's wearing these monkey caps and balaclavas, shivering in 20 degrees, I'm afraid to say here.
Oh, it sounds terrible, as we're about 15 degrees colder. Talk to me about one of these stories that you've been looking at, which is to do with Indian doctors not very happy with the government because it is offering, or considering offering, a short kind of bridging course to homeopaths and others trained in alternative medicines that would allow them to become doctors. It's being called sanctioned quackery.
Yes, indeed it is. And, you know, this is not the first time the idea has been considered. And whilst a lot of doctors have yesterday went on a strike in private hospitals, others in public hospitals were wearing black armbands to say, look, what a ludicrous idea this is. What the government and actually some other people involved in the medical profession say is India has a huge problem. It does not produce enough doctors. And not only does it not produce enough doctors, but if you go into the rural sector of the country, many doctors don't want to go and stay there because they say the facilities aren't good enough for their children in terms of education, etc. So what's going to happen to the health needs of these people? You can't suddenly create, you know, double the number of doctors overnight, so you have to find some sort of interim solution. And that's what this idea has always been, that you take people who practice medicine, these sort of quacks that exist up and down this country, and give them a little bit more professional training. Look, they're operating anyway, a lot of people say. So, you know, give them some medical skills so that they're able to cope with basic emergencies so that people in those areas can actually have some sort of medical treatment when they need it in those situations. I mean, doctors, on the other hand, say, look, you know, this is just not the right way to do it. But I have to say, you know, when I go to rural India, you see quacks performing there. They are being used by a lot of people there. I think there are a lot of critics, there are a lot of others who say you have to give some sort of medical facilities to people, so let's try this method out, because at the moment you have millions and millions of people in India who have no access to healthcare.
Indeed. Another story which is in the Times of India today, the number of visitors to the Taj Mahal is to be capped at 40,000 a day. Why is that?
I think it is just the damage that the sheer number of people who are visiting the Taj Mahal, you know, cause. I mean, I've been there on public holidays to India's most famous monument, one of the greatest monuments in the world, you know, and you can have 60, 80,000 people who are turning up. And there's been a long debate about how do you protect, you know, India's iconic building. And I think now this is why they've decided that at least for Indians, there's going to be 20,000 in the morning, 20,000 in the afternoon. Once they cross that figure, you just won't be able to go in. The good news for all the foreign tourists is no restrictions on them. Well, obviously they pay far more than Indians. Anyway, and I think it's part of a much wider debate, whether you're talking about India's, you know, when India's looking at tourism, about how to protect it. I mean, you know, the tigers are another thing here. I mean, how do you protect the national parks from the huge number of people who are coming in? And I think India's looking at a much more long-term vision when it comes to tourism now, because it's not about getting people in over the next 10 years, it's about the next 50, 100 years, about how you develop it. So I think we could see more things like this at other sites in India as well.
Is this controversial with many people that Indians are going to be restricted in numbers visiting an Indian monument, yet foreigners won't be?
I think once it comes in, it probably will be. And I think it's about communicating that information accurately to people, because often when you go to the Taj, you know, you'll see people who come from miles, from villages, a lifetime's moment to go and see it. And if they turn up and find out that it's shut, or it's going to be shut to them, I'm sure they are going to get pretty angry. I mean, I think it's about getting that information out. A lot of people still turn up at the Taj Mahal, foreigners and Indians, on a Friday, even though it's closed. So I think it's getting that information out. But certainly, if you've spent a lot of money getting there as an Indian and you're restricted to get in, and now you see foreigners going in, well, you may get annoyed. But there there is a little loophole there. If you do want to go in, if you pay the foreigner's rate, whether you're a foreigner or not, you will be allowed in. The problem is, for many Indians, that's just going to be way too expensive.
Indeed. Interesting. Thank you, Rahul. Get back indoors. Get out of all that fumes. Clearly got the back of your throat a bit earlier. Good to talk to you as always. That's the BBC's Rahul Tandon there in Calcutta, in India.
And they called it puppy love.
How much is that hound dog in the window? I do hope that flea bangs first.
Dog's life, what a life. That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me.
Well, we are going doggy crazy on Business Matters. Various songs, I'm sure you'll recognise that. I won't ask Andrew People and Bridget Bodnar to name every single song. That would be unfair. But we are going to discuss something called paternity leave. We've discussed over the years on Business Matters the various pet-friendly policies that companies have brought in, but this is a new related trend. Lots of employees, of course, take paternity leave when they have a baby or adopt a child, but now many companies are offering paternity leave for pet owners. It is where employees are allowed to take time off when they get a new dog. It started among US technology startup businesses, but it seems to be spreading. A brewery in Ohio has introduced the policy. It's the appropriately named Brewdog USA. I've been talking to the boss, Tanisha Robinson, and I asked her about her own four-legged friends.
I actually have 3 dogs. We have a pit bull hound mix, a chihuahua, and a Pomeranian. So about 90 pounds of dogs, but in the form of 3 creatures.
And so why did you decide then to introduce paternity? Was this because you yourself wanted some time off?
No, I don't have any new dogs on my horizon, which is now post the introduction of paternity leave, but we feel that it's a great benefit to offer our team when they introduce a new family member, whether it's a human or canine member of the family, so that people can take time to bond.
It's not just because you've got the word dog in the name of the company.
Well, I mean, our company was founded by 2 humans and 1 dog 10 years ago, so that is certainly an important component of our business.
What is the benefit of doing this? Because you don't offer it for people who get a new cat or a new rabbit or something, do you? So why have you decided to introduce it?
We want to be the best place to work on the earth ever, and dogs have a special place in the history of our business, and certainly as someone who's horribly allergic to cats, I think dogs are truly a man's best friend.
How much time then can people take off?
People get a week off if they bring a new dog into their family.
And it's paid?
Yes.
How many people have made use of this then so far?
So on our U.S. team, we've had 4 people take paternity leave so far.
What do the colleagues of people with dogs make of this? Because if you don't have a dog, of course, you're not entitled to it.
Well, they certainly have the opportunity to be entitled to it if they adopt a dog or bring a new dog into their family. But we also are a dog-friendly office space, so there's a lot of love for dogs in our business.
Do you think it's only a certain type of company that does and will offer this kind of leave for employees? Because some people still grumble they get too few holidays, never mind being able to take time off to look after a pet.
Well, at Brewdog, it's really important for us to take great care of our people. Our 2 most important things in our whole business are our people and our beer. And for us, that means letting people spend some time bonding with a new puppy if they get one.
You said you also let people bring dogs to work. Do they not cause a nuisance in the office, wandering in during meetings or demanding they go for walkies when you're on a deadline or something?
I mean, I know my dogs behave that way because the Chihuahua is the pack leader.